It's strange how silence can feel wrong in a house that's usually humming with life. That night, it was the silence that told me something was off before I even noticed the front door was ajar. The porch light flickered against the drizzle, painting my driveway in nervous gold. I tightened my grip on my tote bag and froze halfway up the steps. The door, my solid oak front door that I always double-locked, hung open just wide enough for the autumn wind to whisper through. For a second, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to latch it. I'm meticulous to a fault. Forgetting something like that would be unlike me. Still, I stepped closer, my pulse keeping time with the raindrops. When I pushed the door open, the air inside felt wrong. My living room, usually neat, warm, alive, was a wreck. Books scattered, couch cushions ripped open, and across the pale blue wall in thick red lipstick, one word screamed back at me, selfish. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. That word, it wasn't random. It was a voice from my past, one I'd tried to outrun for years. My name is Harper Ellis, I'm 34, and I thought I'd finally built a life that was mind-steady job, small circle of good friends, and this house I saved for nearly a decade to buy. I never imagined it would turn into a battlefield. Before I tell you how my family managed to shatter both my walls and my peace, let me ask you something. Have you ever worked your entire life for something only for the people who should love you most to try and take it away? If you've ever had to protect yourself from family who only call when they need something, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story. Because what happened in this house taught me one thing, sometimes, the people you need to lock the door against are the ones who share your last name. I picked up the fallen photo frame near the doorway, my parents and me, smiling in front of our old house in Salem, and whispered, almost to the woman in the picture, "You were right to move away." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, I knew my past had just walked back in. The sound of thunder outside pulled me back 5 years back to the house in Salem, Oregon, where everything had looked perfect from the sidewalk. Freshly cut grass, hanging flower baskets, my mother's favorite wind chime swaying in the breeze. From the outside, we looked like the picture of a stable, middle-class family. Inside, though, it was a quiet competition I never signed up for. I was 29 then, working 2 part-time jobs while finishing my degree in business. My dad, Robert, would come home from his engineering job, drop his lunchbox on the counter, and ask, "Did Elena send more of her paintings?" "She's got real potential, that girl." I'd be sitting right there, eating cereal after my evening shift. "I got my scholarship letter today," I said once, hoping for a smile. He barely looked up. "That's good, Harper." But you know how rare it is to make it in art? We need to keep investing in her while she's got momentum. Investing, that was their word for what felt like giving her the world while I learned to survive on scraps. Mom, Linda, adored Elena like she was made of glass and light. "Your sister just needs time to bloom," she'd say while packing up another box of art supplies for shipping to Seattle. "You're so independent, Harper. You'll figure things out." Independent. That word stung even then. It meant I didn't need help. It meant no one was coming to save me. Elena called often, her voice always dramatic through the speakerphone. "Mom, Dad, the rent here is crazy and the gallery says I need new materials. Can you wire me something by Friday?" There was never hesitation, money, advice, sympathy. She had it all. I remember watching Mom fill out a check, her handwriting careful, her smile soft. "This is what family does," she murmured. I wanted to believe that until the day I realized family only worked one way in our house, so I stopped asking for anything. I worked nights, studied mornings, and told myself that someday I'd build a life where love wasn't measured by invoices and guilt. I didn't know then that my quiet determination, the same strength they ignored, would one day make me their enemy, and that the word selfish would come back, written on my own wall. Maybe it was that hunger for stability that made me fall in love with the old house the moment I saw it. 3 years after leaving Salem, I was 32, finally earning a steady salary as a financial analyst in Portland. I'd spent years living out of rentals' thin walls, noisy neighbors, temporary addresses. I craved permanence, something no one could take away from me. The realtor had warned me, it's a bit of a fixer-upper. But when I stepped onto the porch of the 1925 Craftsman on Laurelhurst Avenue, I didn't see work. I saw possibility. The porch posts were carved oak, the paint faded but honest. The air smelled like rain and cedar. Inside, sunlight spilled through lead-glass windows, scattering tiny rainbows across the wooden floor. I ran my hand along the banister. It was smooth, worn by decades of other lives. This house has survived more than I have, I thought. The realtor smiled politely as I stood still, taking it all in. You know, she said, it's actually on Portland's historical registry. The previous owner's grandfather built it himself. Historical registry? I repeated. So it can't be torn down or changed much? Exactly, it's protected property. I laughed softly. Good, maybe that's what I need, something that can't just vanish. When I finally signed the papers a month later, I cried in the parking lot. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness, more like release. Every dollar, every sleepless night, every rejection had led me to that moment. Moving in was messy and perfect. The first week, I painted the kitchen cabinets a warm cream and replaced the cracked light fixtures myself. The second week, my new neighbor, Mrs. Keller, stopped by with a pie. You bought the old Branson place? She asked, eyes kind but sharp. It's got good bones. Keep her well, and she'll keep you safe. I smiled. That's exactly what I planned to do. My life finally started to feel like mine. I hosted dinner nights with coworkers, planted lavender by the fence, learned how to fix a leaky faucet from YouTube. Every small repair felt symbolic. Each nail, each coat of paint, another layer between me and the past. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd sit on the porch steps with a cup of tea and watch the neighborhood lights blink on. Portland rain would mist against my hair, and I'd whisper, "You made it, Harper." I didn't know then that this same porch, this same house that had become my sanctuary, would one day turn into a crime scene. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet, steady, predictable. The kind of night I'd built my life around. I'd just finished watering the herbs by the kitchen window when my phone buzzed across the counter. Unknown caller. I almost ignored it. Spam calls, political surveys, same routine. But something, maybe instinct, made me swipe to answer. Hello? For a second, all I heard was the faint hum of a line connecting two separate worlds. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years slipped through, smooth, casual, and achingly familiar. Hi, sweetie. It's Mom. The watering can slipped from my hand, clattering against the tile. Water pooled around my feet, cold against my skin. Mom? I whispered, as if saying the word might make it less surreal. Yes, Harper, she continued, her tone bright, too bright. How are you, honey? We've missed you. 5 years of silence, and that was it? No apology. No explanation, just a tone that pretended nothing had happened. I'm surprised to hear from you, I managed. Well, she said, pausing just long enough to sound rehearsed. Your father and I were talking, and we thought, it's time we all get together again. Maybe dinner this Friday? At the house. Elena will be there too. The name hit me like static. Elena. My little sister, the reason that silence had begun in the first place. Dinner? I repeated, stalling for time. It's been too long, she said warmly. You'll come, won't you? It would mean the world to your father. Her words were soft, but beneath them I could hear the same old script, the guilt, the insistence, the subtle pressure wrapped in affection. I gripped the counter, weighing the ache of curiosity against the safety of distance. Sure, I heard myself say before my brain caught up. Friday. When the call ended, the house fell silent again. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room, steady and indifferent. I stared at the puddle on the floor, my reflection fractured in the water, and felt a rush of conflicting emotions: hope, dread, and something heavier I couldn't yet name. I hadn't spoken to them in half a decade, yet all it took was one phone call to feel 16 again, wanting their approval and bracing for their disappointment. I knelt to wipe up the spill, whispering to the empty kitchen, "Whatever this is, Harper, you're not that girl anymore." Still, deep down, I wasn't sure I believed myself. The drive to Salem took just over an hour, but it felt longer. The closer I got, the heavier the air became, like the years of silence were thickening into fog around me. When I finally turned onto the street where I grew up, my chest tightened. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The once perfect lawn was patchy and overgrown. The paint on the porch rails had peeled in strips, exposing gray wood beneath. Even the welcome mat, once cheerful and clean, was worn down to threads. I parked by the curb, sat for a moment, and told myself to breathe. "You're here for one dinner, Harper. Nothing more." When I knocked, Dad opened the door. He'd aged in ways I wasn't prepared for: thinner, hair nearly all gray, the lines around his mouth deeper. "Harper," he said, like my name was a question. "Hi, Dad." He nodded once. "Come in." The air inside smelled of lemon cleaner and something faintly burnt. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wearing the same floral apron she used to wear every Sunday. Her smile looked painted on. "There she is," she said brightly, arms outstretched. "Still so serious. You need to smile more, honey." I let her hug me, stiffly. "It's good to see you too, Mom." She stepped back, studying me. "You've lost weight. Are you eating properly? You work too hard." "I'm fine," I said, smiling politely. The living room looked different. Half the furniture was gone. The fancy wall art that once screamed middle-class pride had been replaced with framed family photos in mismatched dollar store frames. The silence between us settled thickly until Mom spoke again. "Your sister's running late," she said, pouring wine into glasses that didn't match. "She had an appointment she couldn't miss, but she's so excited to see you." I nodded, pretending to believe her. We made small talk safe topics like weather and work, but every question carried a hidden weight. "So," Dad said after a pause, "still at that finance job in Portland?" "Yes." "I got promoted last year." He said, expression unreadable. "Must pay well." "It's comfortable." "Comfortable," he repeated as though testing the word. Before I could respond, the front door flew open. Elena burst in, a gust of perfume and noise. Sorry, traffic was insane," she said, dropping her expensive handbag on the coffee table. "Oh my God, Harper!" She hugged me before I could brace myself, her diamond earrings brushing my cheek. She still looked effortlessly polished, every inch of her designed to be noticed. "You look so corporate," she teased. "I've missed you." "Hi, Elena," I said carefully. "You look successful." She laughed, flipping her perfect hair. "Trying to be, you know how it is." We moved to the dining room. The table, once covered with Mom's elaborate spreads, now held a modest meal-roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, a single bottle of mid-range wine. Dinner started politely, too politely. Elena talked the most, her voice bright, but edged with tension. "So, my boutique's been doing great," she began. Or it was, until the landlord started renovations, and, the economy? A nightmare for creatives. Mom nodded sympathetically. Dad cut his chicken in silence. I stayed quiet, sipping my wine. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Your sister's had some financial challenges lately." Elena sighed dramatically. "Challenges?" "Try disasters. My business partner bailed, the bank fees are killing me, and, well, I've racked up some debt." "How much?" I asked before I could stop myself. Elena glanced at Mom, then looked down. $260,000, Dad said flatly. The fork slipped from my fingers. "I'm sorry, what?" Mom leaned forward, her tone soft and pleading. Your sister just needs a little help getting back on her feet. Elena's eyes flicked toward me. You have your house now, right? You could sell it, or maybe refinance. You'd still be fine. I stared at her, stunned. You want me to sell my house? Not want, Mom corrected quickly. We're saying maybe it's time family came together again. Family helps family. There it was, the old mantra. The one that had once stripped me of every boundary. I set my glass down carefully. I've helped before. It didn't end well. Dad's jaw tightened. You're doing well, Harper. We're just asking you to share your good fortune. My good fortune is a decade of work, Dad. It's not luck, it's sacrifice. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You've become so cold. We raised you better than this. I laughed under my breath. You raised me to fix what everyone else broke. Elena's voice rose, sharp and defensive. God, you've always been jealous, pretending to be this martyr just because you saved some money. Enough, I said, standing. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. You haven't asked how I'm doing. You haven't said a word about my life. You just want what I have. The table fell silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop. Dad's voice broke it. If you walk out now, don't expect another invitation. I met his eyes. You gave me that same choice 5 years ago. My sister or my money. You made it clear which one mattered more. I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. Dinner was illuminating, Mom called after me, her voice cracking. Family helps family. I paused at the doorway, glanced back once, and said quietly, then maybe you should have helped me when I needed it. Outside, the Salem night was cool and silent. As I got into my car, the porch light flickered behind me, like the house itself couldn't decide whether to let me go. A week passed after that dinner in Salem. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't even check social media. I wanted to believe the silence meant it was over, that they'd realized how wrong it was to ask me to sacrifice my home for Elena's mistakes. But guilt in my family had a way of showing up uninvited. It was a Saturday morning in Portland early spring, the kind of day that smelled like rain and possibility. I was halfway through repainting the hallway when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw the unmistakable shape of my parents' old silver Honda. I froze, paintbrush midair. 2 doors opened. Dad climbed out first, wearing his pressed khakis and that same heavy scowl. Mom followed, balancing a covered dish like we were still pretending to be close. I hadn't invited them. When I opened the door, I kept my tone even. Hi, what brings you here? Mom smiled like we were neighbors dropping by for coffee. We were in the area and thought we'd surprise you. I made chicken pot pie, your favorite. I stared at the dish. That's kind of you, but you should have called first. Oh, nonsense, she said, stepping forward. You work too much. You need some company. Dad brushed past me without waiting for permission. Nice place, he muttered, scanning the entryway like a building inspector. His gaze lingered on the hardwood floors, the new light fixtures, the faint scent of fresh paint. I followed him into the living room, every muscle tight. Coffee? I offered, because politeness was the last shield I had. He grunted in response, already peering into the open archway toward the kitchen. So this is the famous house? Must have cost a fortune. Mom set the pie on the counter, her eyes darting everywhere, pictures on the walls, mail stacked neatly by the door, the small ceramic bowl where I kept my spare keys. Her voice softened. You've done so well, Harper. You should be proud. It sounded sincere until she added, You know, it's big for just one person. I forced a smile. That's kind of the point. She gave a little laugh, too light to be real. Well, maybe one day it'll be full again. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured coffee, and for a few minutes, we performed the old routine weather, work, polite nods. Then Mom asked, Where do you keep all your important papers? It must be a lot to manage alone. My fingers tightened around the mug. Why? Oh, just curious, she said quickly. We've been sorting through our own files lately. It's such a headache keeping track of everything. Dad stood and wandered toward the hallway. Mind if I look around? Yes, actually, I said, sharper than intended. He turned, eyebrows raised. I'm just admiring. Don't get so defensive. I followed as he moved to my office door. This where you do your finance work? He asked, pushing it open before I could answer. His eyes landed on the filing cabinet against the wall. You always were organized. I like knowing where things are, I said evenly, stepping between him and the desk. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Smart girl. Mom appeared behind him, pretending to admire a framed diploma. Her gaze flicked toward the key rack by the back door, where my spare house key hung beside my car fob. She didn't touch it, but I noticed the way her eyes lingered a second too long. Something cold tightened in my chest. After half an hour, I managed to usher them out. Mom hugged me goodbye, whispering, We just want to make sure you're doing okay, sweetheart. I am, I said, and I'd like to keep it that way. As their car rolled away, I locked the door and leaned against it, the smell of paint mixing with unease. They hadn't come to visit, they'd come to inspect, and I realized then that their silence wasn't peace, it was planning. For a few days after my parents' surprise visit, the house felt uneasy, like it was holding its breath. I tried to go back to routine, morning coffee, spreadsheets, evening runs. But peace had a way of slipping through the cracks when my family was involved. It started with a text from Mom. Dad hasn't been sleeping. He's worried sick about you. Then another, a few hours later. We just want to make sure you're making good choices. Family should talk about big decisions together. I didn't reply. Silence was my only armor. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6 a.m., a new message from Dad. You're acting like a stranger. We raised you better. Don't forget where you came from. By lunchtime, the tone had changed from guilt to attack. You think money makes you better than us? Wait until you need something. We'll see whose family then. I muted their numbers, but they weren't done. That night, I opened Facebook to a flurry of notifications. My mother had posted a long, poetic paragraph about children who abandon their families for material things. It didn't name me, but everyone knew. My aunt commented, Some people forget who fed them. Then came Elena. Her Instagram story showed a photo of her crying, captioned, Some people have houses while their families drown in debt. But hey, at least they have peace, right? Dozens of mutual friends had liked it. A few even messaged me privately, half curious, half judgmental. That night, I sat in the dark living room, the blue light from my phone reflecting off the window, and wondered if they realized how cruel it was to turn the internet into a weapon. The next day at work, my coworker Tara stopped by my desk, hesitant. Hey, are you okay? I saw something online, your family... I cut her off gently. Don't worry about it, it's just noise. But my voice cracked on the last word. Later that night, Tara came over with takeout. She dropped her phone on the table, opened her notes app, and said, You need to document everything. Screenshots, texts, posts, everything. This is harassment, Harper. Emotional manipulation, wrapped in nostalgia. We spent an hour saving every message, labeling each by date. Watching my own family's cruelty laid out in digital folders made me feel hollow. That weekend, Mrs. Keller, my elderly neighbor, stopped me by the mailbox. Sweetheart, she said softly, I saw your mother's posts. Don't let that shame sink in. People who can't control you will always call you ungrateful. I smiled weakly. It's just words. She shook her head. Words are seeds, dear. Left alone, they grow into something ugly. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, I sat on my couch, scrolling through the messages again. My parents' guilt trips. Elena's performance of victimhood. The digital echo of a family that couldn't love without control. I deleted nothing. I archived every word. Not out of bitterness, but because a small, uneasy voice whispered that this was only the beginning. When my phone buzzed again near midnight, I ignored it. I turned off the ringer, double-checked the locks, and whispered to myself, "They want chaos. I'll give them silence." Still, beneath that silence, something in me knew. They weren't finished. Not yet. The storm that night rolled in without warning, dark clouds pressing low over Portland, wind shaking the maple branches outside my window. I'd stayed late at the office, finishing client reports, trying to lose myself in numbers instead of thoughts. When I finally drove home, rain streaked across the windshield like silver threads. The streets glistened, empty and quiet. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked, right before everything changed. My porch light was on when I pulled into the driveway. That part wasn't unusual, but as I stepped out of the car, something felt off. The air was too still, too heavy. My hand froze on my keys when I noticed the front door open just an inch. At first, denial kicked in. Maybe I didn't lock it properly, maybe the wind. But I knew better. I always locked that door. Always. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof as I crept closer. Through the crack, faint noises echoed a clatter, a muffled voice. My stomach twisted. Someone was inside. I backed away, heart pounding, and pulled out my phone. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. My name's Harper Ellis, I whispered. I'm at 3117 Laurelhurst Avenue. My house, someone's inside. Stay outside, ma'am, she said firmly. Officers are on their way. Do not go in. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. But then I heard it, my mother's voice. Check the office again, Robert. The deed has to be here somewhere. My breath caught. My fingers went numb around the phone. Ma'am? The dispatcher said. Are you still there? It's my parents, I whispered. And my sister. They broke in. Before I could stop myself, I pushed the door open. The scene inside knocked the air out of me. The living room was a battlefield. My bookshelf lay on its side, pages scattered like fallen leaves, cushions ripped open, their stuffing spilling across the floor. The photo of me on closing day, me smiling with the keys to this house, was shattered on the ground, and scrawled across the wall in red lipstick, the same haunting word, selfish. My father turned from the corner where he'd been rifling through my desk drawers. Harper, what the hell are you doing? I shouted. My voice trembled, but it came out sharp enough to slice through the chaos. Mom stepped out from the hallway, clutching a folder. You weren't supposed to be home yet, she said, like I'd interrupted a chore. This is my house, I snapped. You broke in! You destroyed everything! Before she could answer, Elena appeared from my bedroom, holding a handful of papers. Found them, she said breathlessly. Mortgage documents, financial statements, this is it. Then her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, her triumphant expression faltered. Give those back, I said, taking a step forward. Dad raised his hand, as if calming a child. Now let's not get dramatic. We're trying to help you. Help me? I laughed, disbelief flooding through me. You trashed my home! Mom's tone turned scolding, almost maternal. You're blinded by pride, Harper. This isn't just about you, it's about family. Things can be replaced, people can't. Then why are you destroying my things? I demanded. Elena's lip curled. You wouldn't give me what I needed. You left us no choice. You had every choice, I shot back, and every one of them was selfish. Sirens wailed in the distance. Dad noticed them too. His voice sharpened. You called the police? Yes, I said. And they'll be here any minute. You'd call the cops on your own parents? Mom's face twisted, tears smudging her makeup. After everything we've done for you? Tell me, I said quietly. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Other than teach me how to survive without you? The sirens grew louder. Elena started to panic, shoving the papers back toward Dad. We should go! He grabbed her wrist. Not yet, I stepped in front of the door. "You're not leaving with my documents." Dad's voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Move, Harper." I held my ground. "If you touch me, it's not just breaking and entering anymore. It's assault." Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Tires crunched on wet gravel. Mom looked terrified now. "This is just a misunderstanding," she said quickly, voice rising. "We're family. Families fight. No one needs to get hurt." "Families don't break in and ransack each other's homes," I said. "You did this to yourselves." A knock thundered against the door. "Portland Police!" I turned the lock and opened it just enough to see the officers outside, 2 of them, their flashlights sweeping over the wreckage behind me. "This way," I said, my voice steady now. Dad tried to speak, but Officer Reyes, a calm, broad-shouldered woman, cut him off. "Sir, step away from the resident." Mom stammered. "We were just visiting—" Reyes raised an eyebrow. "With the door kicked in and property destroyed?" Elena, shaking, whispered, "We didn't mean for it to go this far." But it had. I stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, watching as they were separated and questioned. I could still hear Dad trying to reason with the male officer, saying, "It's a family matter." Reyes turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated only long enough to see my mother's eyes, pleading, desperate, unrepentant. "Yes," I said. "All of them." When they led my family out, the neighbors had gathered across the street, whispering behind umbrellas. Mrs. Keller stood among them, her face pale with disbelief. The last thing I saw before the patrol car doors closed was Elena looking back at me, her expression a mix of rage and something else, fear, maybe. When the lights disappeared down the street, the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was aftermath. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let myself slide to the floor. The smell of rain mixed with the sharp scent of broken things. My house, my sanctuary, had become evidence, and I knew, as I sat there trembling in the dark, that this wasn't just the end of a family argument, it was the beginning of a war. The rain hadn't stopped by the time the officer stepped inside. Water pooled by the doorway where I stood barefoot, shaking, still clutching the phone that had called them here. The red and blue lights flashing through the windows turned everything, my walls, the mess, the faces of my parents, into a surreal painting. Officer Reyes was the first to speak, her voice calm and steady, the kind of tone meant to de-escalate chaos. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I managed. My throat felt raw. "I'm Harper Ellis. They broke in." She nodded and motioned to the younger officer beside her. "Stay with Miss Ellis," she said, then turned to my family. "Step away from the resident, please. Hands where I can see them." Dad's tone was defensive, almost proud. "We're not criminals. We're her family." Reyes's brow arched slightly. "Then why did I have to force the door open to get in?" Mom started crying, the same trembling sob she used whenever she needed sympathy. "This is all a misunderstanding," she insisted. "We were just visiting." "The door must have blown open in the storm." I almost laughed. The doorframe was splintered, clearly pried open with something metal. Reyes glanced at me. "Can you confirm they didn't have permission to enter?" "None," I said. "They've been harassing me for weeks. Tonight they broke in and destroyed my property." The younger officer's flashlight panned over the chaos, the overturned shelves, the ripped cushions, the red lipstick word screaming across the wall. He muttered something low under his breath, something like Jesus Christ. Elena tried to step forward. "You're twisting everything. We just needed to look at some papers. She's making it sound—" Reyes cut her off. "Ma'am, you're not helping your case. Please step back." "Papers?" the younger officer asked, turning toward them. "What kind of papers?" Dad hesitated, then pointed toward the folder on the floor. "Property documents," he said. "We were trying to make sense of her finances." Reyes's tone hardened. "You broke into her home to make sense of her finances?" He stammered. "She's our daughter. We have a right to—" No, sir, Reyes said firmly. You don't. Mom's tears turned sharp. You can't arrest us. This is a family matter. No one needs to make it ugly. I stepped closer, trembling but resolute. You made it ugly the moment you broke my lock. The words hung there. Even the officers paused for a beat before Reyes spoke again. All right, we'll take statements. While the second officer separated my parents and sister for questioning, Reyes led me aside near the kitchen. Her voice softened. You did the right thing calling us. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? I nodded weakly. My neighbor, Mrs. Keller, she'll help. Good, she said. We'll get a victim advocate to reach out as well. You're not alone, Ms. Ellis. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone said you're not alone without strings attached. Behind us, Dad was raising his voice again. This is insane! We're not thieves! Reyes turned sharply. Then stop acting like one! I caught Elena's gaze across the room. For a split second, her anger cracked into fear. She mouthed something. I didn't mean this. I looked away. Intent didn't erase impact. The officers photographed everything, the broken furniture, the lipstick on the wall, the scattered papers they'd tried to steal. When Reyes picked up the folder, she handed it to me. You'll want to secure your documents somewhere safe, she said quietly. Bank box, maybe. These people know too much about your property. Yeah, I said, voice shaking. I noticed. An hour later, they led my parents and Elena outside in the rain. The neighbors had gathered faces half hidden behind curtains and umbrellas. Mrs. Keller stood on her porch, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of fury on my behalf. As the officers guided my family toward separate cars, Mom called out, Harper, please! You don't have to do this, we're family! I stood in the doorway, soaked and exhausted. No, Mom, you did this. When the patrol cars pulled away, their lights fading down the street, the silence that followed was deafening. My house was still wrecked, my heart still racing, but a strange clarity settled in. For the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing. Reyes lingered a moment before leaving. You'll need to file a full report tomorrow. We'll contact you first thing in the morning. Thank you, I said. She nodded once. Sometimes family lines get blurred. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for drawing them straight again. After she left, I locked the door, what was left of it, and leaned against the frame. Outside, the storm was easing, leaving the air clean, almost quiet. I looked around at the wreckage and whispered to the empty room. They thought they could walk in and take what's mine. Not anymore. Then, for the first time that night, I let myself cry, not from fear, but from the relief of finally being heard. The morning after the break-in, I didn't recognize my own house. The walls were bare where pictures used to hang, my shelves gutted, the floor a collage of glass and paper. The lipstick word selfish still screamed from the living room wall, a reminder that peace could be vandalized in seconds. I didn't clean. I couldn't. The evidence felt sacred proof that the madness wasn't just in my head anymore. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Officer Reyes. The DA's office will need your full statement by Friday, she said. And it might be smart to get legal counsel. Given what they were after, you'll want protection on both fronts. What they were after, I repeated, staring at the papers still scattered across the floor. I had an idea, but I didn't yet understand how deep it went. By noon, I was sitting across from Tom Harris, a real estate and family law attorney in downtown Portland. His office smelled like leather and coffee. Certificates lined the walls, someone who made a living untangling disasters like mine. He studied me quietly as I handed him the folder the police had recovered. These were the documents your family tried to take? I nodded. Mortgage agreements, title papers, old financial statements. They were obsessed with them, but I don't understand why. He opened the folder carefully, like it might detonate. May I? Please, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. He leafed through the pages in silence for a while. I sat there, twisting my hands in my lap, listening to the rain against the window. Finally, he exhaled through his nose, the sound low and deliberate. "Well," he said, "I think I know why they were so determined." My stomach dropped. "Tell me." "Your house isn't just real estate, Harper," he began. "It's designated as a protected property under the Portland Historical Registry. That means it can't be sold or refinanced without prior approval from the Historical Society, and any buyer would have to comply with strict preservation rules." I blinked, trying to process. "I remember that from the listing. The realtor said it was a charming detail." Tom gave a grim smile. "Charming, yes, but it also limits the market value. Anyone trying to liquidate the property quickly or use it for collateral would hit a wall." I frowned. "So they couldn't just sell it if they somehow got my signature?" "Exactly. They likely didn't know that until they started digging, my guess. They were trying to find documentation to fake your authorization, probably to start a refinancing process under your name." I felt my breath catch. They'd really do that? He didn't answer immediately. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his tone softening. "People do desperate things when money runs out. You mentioned your sister's debt?" $260,000, I whispered. "And my parents emptied their retirement to help her years ago. I guess they wanted me to be their safety net." Tom nodded slowly. "That kind of dynamic doesn't vanish. It escalates until someone says no. You said no, and they decided to take what they thought was owed." I pressed my palms to my temples, fighting the sting behind my eyes. "So what happens now?" "First," he said, flipping open a notepad, "we'll file for a restraining order emergency protection, given the break-in and attempted document theft. It should keep them a minimum of 500 feet away from your home and workplace." I nodded numbly. "Next," he continued, "we'll pursue a civil suit for property damage and emotional distress. Your homeowner's insurance will likely cover repairs, but the lawsuit establishes liability. And—" he hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Given the evidence, the DA may add attempted fraud to the criminal case." "Fraud?" I repeated. "They broke in for financial documents, Harper. That's intent, and intent matters." The words sat heavy between us. For a while, all I could do was stare at the rain streaking down the glass window behind him. "I feel like my whole life has been one long lesson in boundaries," I said quietly. "Every time I draw one, they find a way to cross it." Tom leaned back in his chair. "That's because boundaries aren't about control, they're about loss. The moment you stopped letting them define your worth, they lost their hold. Some people would rather destroy what they can't own." His words hit harder than I wanted them to. I signed the initial paperwork with trembling hands. The pen felt heavier than it should have. As I stood to leave, Tom said, "One more thing. Install a security system, cameras, alarms, motion sensors. Don't underestimate people who feel entitled." I promised I would. That evening I returned home to find the light fading behind the gray Portland sky. The house smelled of wet wood and sorrow. I walked room to room, taking photos for the insurance claim, each snapshot a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Near the desk where my father had rummaged through drawers, I noticed something half hidden under a fallen stack of papers, a yellowing envelope, edges curled with age. Inside was a certificate, the original historical registry designation, the builder's name, the signature of the preservation committee, the date, 1974. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb, a strange calm washing over me. The house had been protected all along, I thought. They just didn't know it. For the first time in days, I felt something like safety. But as I looked around the half-destroyed room, I also understood something else. They wouldn't stop at failure, they'd find a new angle. Still, now I had truth on my side. Truth and the law. I set the certificate back in the drawer, locked it, and whispered to the empty house, You've stood for a century. You'll stand through this, too. The storm outside had passed, but inside, I could still hear the echo of rain-soft, persistent cleansing. Tomorrow, the fight would move from my living room to the courtroom. And this time, I wouldn't be alone. 6 weeks after the break-in, I found myself sitting on a wooden bench in Multnomah County Courthouse, the smell of polished oak and recycled air thick around me. It was early spring again, the kind of gray Portland morning where the clouds hung so low it felt like the sky itself was listening. I'd rehearsed this day 1,000 times in my head, how I'd sit upright, how I wouldn't cry, how I'd finally stop explaining myself to people who refused to listen. But sitting there, hands clasped in my lap, heart hammering against my ribs, all I could think was how much I hated the word family. Tom Harris, my attorney, leaned toward me. You ready? As I'll ever be. The double doors opened, and a court clerk called our case. State of Oregon versus Robert Mitchell, Linda Mitchell, and Elena Mitchell. Charges: breaking and entering, property destruction, attempted fraud, and harassment. The sound of my family's names together like that made something twist inside me, a grief deeper than anger. They entered moments later. Mom looked small in her beige cardigan, her face drawn and pale. Dad, by contrast, walked like the system itself was beneath him, shoulders square, jaw locked. Elena followed a few steps behind, dressed neatly but with the hollow eyes of someone who hadn't slept. They didn't look at me. I wasn't sure if that made it easier or worse. When the hearing began, the district attorney outlined the events like they were reading from someone else's life. Harassment through digital means, a forced entry, attempted access to financial and legal documents. The officer's photos appeared on a large screen, my living room torn apart, the lipstick word across the wall, the damage to the lock. Tom whispered, "Stay calm. The evidence speaks for itself." I did. But when I heard Officer Reyes's voice from the witness stand describing the scene, Ms. Ellis was visibly shaken but composed, and the defendants were attempting to justify their presence. I felt tears prick my eyes. I clenched my fists in my lap until my nails left half-moon marks in my palms. Then it was Elena's turn. Her attorney tried to spin the story. A misunderstanding fueled by financial stress, not malice. But when she took the stand, something changed. She looked right at me for the first time since that night. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said quietly. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "I thought we'd just find the papers, see if there was a way to fix things. Dad said it would just take a minute." "Fix things?" the DA repeated. "By breaking into your sister's home and stealing her mortgage documents?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I know how it sounds." "I was desperate. I didn't want to lose everything. I thought she has so much and I have nothing." Her words hit me like glass shattering. I almost pitied her. Almost. Tom stood for the cross-examination. "Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true that your debt is not $260,000 as originally claimed?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Would you clarify the real number?" "Closer to 30,000, she admitted softly. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Mom looked startled. Tom pressed gently. "So the original amount was exaggerated by whom?" Elena glanced at our parents. "Dad," she whispered. "He said Harper wouldn't help unless it sounded serious." My father's face turned crimson. "That's not true," he barked, but the judge silenced him with a sharp rap of the gavel. Tom let the silence linger before speaking again. "Ms. Ellis refused to give money 5 years ago, correct?" "Yes," Elena said. "And since then, you and your parents continued to request financial help?" "Yes." "When she refused again, the 3 of you entered her home without consent, attempted to retrieve her property documents, and vandalized the space?" Elena nodded, trembling. "Yes." "Thank you," Tom said, returning to his seat. I exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible, but it felt like releasing 5 years of tension. When Dad took the stand, he looked every bit the wounded patriarch. "We didn't mean to harm her," he said, voice firm but shaking. "We just wanted to protect the family. She's always been distant, cold. We thought if we showed her—" "By breaking into her home?" The DA interrupted. He swallowed hard. "We panicked. We've lost everything. Retirement gone, savings gone. Elena's our only child who still needed help. And Harper, well, she's fine. She has this big house, this career. She could have helped." The DA's tone was icy. "So, because she was stable, you felt entitled to her assets?" My father's lips tightened. "Family helps family." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, help does not include theft or intimidation. That's not family." "That's coercion." Mom began crying openly at that point. "We didn't know what else to do," she said between sobs. "We thought we were losing everyone. We thought if she just sold the house, we could all start over." The judge's expression softened for a moment before turning stern again. "Mrs. Mitchell, your feelings don't excuse your actions. You crossed a line one your daughter had drawn clearly." I looked down at my hands, fighting the urge to cry. For years, I had begged for that line to mean something. Now it finally did, but at a cost. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, hands trembling, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the whispers behind me. "I didn't call the police because I wanted revenge," I said. "I called because I was scared. This house was supposed to be my safe place, something I built on my own. But they made me feel like I didn't deserve it, like anything I had was still theirs to claim." I paused, meeting my mother's eyes. She looked down. "For most of my life, I thought love meant sacrifice," I continued. "But all it did was teach me how to disappear quietly while everyone else took up space. That night, when I saw selfish written on my wall, I realized they'd never understand that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival." The courtroom stayed silent for several seconds after I finished. Even the judge seemed to hesitate before clearing her throat. In the end, the ruling came swiftly. The restraining order was granted for 1 year, extendable at my discretion. My parents received probation and 200 hours of community service. Elena was ordered to attend financial counseling and pay restitution for the property damage. The judge's final words lingered in the air. "Family love without respect is just possession. Ms. Ellis, you've proven that standing alone is better than standing among those who refuse to see your worth." I didn't cry when the gavel came down. I just exhaled, slow and steady, as the weight began to lift. Tom squeezed my shoulder. "You did good," he said quietly. As the bailiff led my family away, Mom turned back once. For the first time, she didn't look angry, just hollow. I almost reached out but stopped myself. Some distances are meant to stay. Outside, the Portland air was cool and damp. Reporters shouted questions I ignored. I just stood on the courthouse steps, looking up at the gray sky that had followed me through every chapter of this fight. It didn't look heavy anymore. It looked open. I wasn't just free from them. I was free from the need to fix what was never mine to fix. 6 months passed after the court ruling. 6 months of quiet mornings and unhurried evenings time that no longer felt borrowed, but earned. Spring had returned to Portland, soft and forgiving, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel safe in my own home again. The new front door gleamed beneath the sunlight, the fresh paint on the walls had long dried, and the hateful word once scrawled across my living room was gone, covered by a framed photograph of the rebuilt garden outside. That garden had become my ritual of healing. Every weekend, I'd pull on my gloves, kneel in the dirt, and plant something new. Lavender, tomatoes, marigolds. Their roots didn't care about the chaos that had once unfolded here. They only cared about sunlight, soil, and care, 3 things I could finally give freely. One morning, Mrs. Keller came over with her straw hat tilted against the sun and a basket of seedlings. "You've turned this place around, Harper," she said proudly, crouching beside me to inspect the sprouting vines. I smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "It's starting to feel like mine again." "It's always been yours," she said softly. "You just had to remind everyone else." We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Birds sang above us, the faint hum of the city beyond the fence sounding distant like the noise of another lifetime. When we finished, I offered her lemonade on the porch. The porch itself had changed too. The railing repaired, the floorboards sanded and sealed, a hanging fern swaying gently in the breeze. I'd installed new motion lights and a camera by the door, not out of fear, but to remind myself I had control now. "You ever hear from them?" she asked gently, her voice cautious. "Not directly," I said. "The restraining order is still in place. Their lawyer sends updates through Tom." "And your sister?" I hesitated. "She's working part-time at an art supply store in Salem. She's in a debt counseling program. The reports say she's showing up and trying." "That's something," Mrs. Keller said. "It is," I admitted. "She even wrote me a letter through my lawyer. No excuses, no demands, just an apology." Mrs. Keller smiled. "And what did you do with it?" I looked toward the living room window, where the letter rested unopened inside a small wooden box on the shelf. "I kept it," I said, "but I'm not ready to read it yet. Maybe someday, when it doesn't feel like reopening a wound." Mrs. Keller nodded knowingly. "Healing doesn't mean forgetting, dear. It means living without the constant ache." When she left, I stayed on the porch, watching the sun slip lower over the neighborhood. The air smelled faintly of lemon balm and earth. Children laughed somewhere down the block. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged, not to anyone, not to expectations, but to the moment itself. That evening, I invited Tara over for dinner. She brought Thai takeout, and we ate cross-legged on the couch, surrounded by the quiet hum of my newly installed security system. "You've made this house feel alive again," she said, glancing around. "It doesn't look like the same place." "It isn't," I said. "Neither am I." Tara tilted her head, studying me. "You look peaceful." I laughed softly. "That's what happens when you stop letting guilt decorate your home." She grinned. "That's going on a bumper sticker." After she left, I cleaned up, turned off the porch light, and stood for a moment in the doorway. Outside, the garden glowed faintly under the solar lamps, a quiet constellation of resilience. I thought about everything that had brought me here, the fear, the courtroom, the tears I'd swallowed for years just to keep the peace. I realize now that keeping peace at any cost wasn't peace at all. It was silence. True peace came from rebuilding patiently, deliberately, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. The following week, Tom called to inform me that the insurance claim was officially closed, and the settlement check would cover not just the repairs, but the upgrades I'd already made. "Seems poetic," he said. "Their destruction paid for your restoration." I smiled faintly. Life has a strange sense of symmetry. When I hung up, I stepped outside again. The garden was in full bloom now. Lavender swayed lazily, and the tomato vines had started to bear small green fruit. I knelt down, brushed dirt from my hands, and whispered, "You made it." But I wasn't just talking to the plants. If you've ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations, you already know there's no easy choice. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. And sometimes the only way to heal is to stop trying to fix people who break everything you build. I used to think love meant saying yes, even when it hurt. Now I know that real love, the kind that lasts, isn't proven by sacrifice. It's measured by respect. I don't regret standing up for myself, even when it meant standing alone. Because in the quiet that followed, I found something better than approval. I found peace. The garden outside my house isn't just a patch of earth. It's proof that destruction can turn into growth, that pain can make space for something new. And if you're listening to this, maybe that's what you need to hear. You're allowed to protect what's yours, your home, your heart, your peace. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it. Tell me in the comments, where do you draw your line when family crosses it? Because in the end, boundaries don't break families. They reveal who's willing to love you without crossing them.